To also share with you guys, first of all, my name is Deetra Miller. I wanted to take a moment and just let you guys know why it was important to do this call. From me, the heart behind it, the vision behind it. Growing up, I really did not know or hear much about voting, even as a young adult. And as an adult, when I had the right and the privilege to vote, it was always about just voting for a president. And to be very honest, it was always about either who sounded good, who appeared or not appeared to be racist. I mean, I'm being transparent with you guys. There was not much research behind it, and I didn't have much to go on, and so I used what I had. And for me, I feel like we can't afford to do that anymore. I feel like with all of the events that have taken place, and this is a very important election that we're up against right now, can't afford to just pick someone. We need to have some knowledge. We need to have some wisdom behind it. We need to start having conversations. Is this conversation going to be the answer to everything? Absolutely not. But is it something? Absolutely yes. We've got to start getting the conversation going. We've got to start getting the questions asked, and we've got to get somewhere in between knowing nothing and then people that know a lot about it. We've got to fill that gap. So I have asked a few people to be on the call with me, and the first one is Darelle. Darelle, I asked you to be on the call because I look at you, one, as a Black man, a father figure, a husband, involved in community, and I think it's important that your voice be heard. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about you and any experience you have with voting?
Definitely. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on this call and invited me to be on the call. It's an honor to be here with some great people, including my cousin Aarica over there. I see you down there, cousin. Very proud of you. First of all, I'm a husband, a father of 3 amazing teenagers. I'm a youth pastor. I'm an artist. But my titles don't define who I am or confine who I am. I'm a lot of things. And my main goal in life is just to be who God called me to be and fulfill my purpose. That is my life goal. I have voted loosely based on the agenda of everybody's doing this or voting for this president on this for this election. And to be completely honest with you, the presidential elections are the only elections that I have known to pay attention to and never had real knowledge about the other elections that affect me more directly until more recently. So I'm kind of in the same boat as a lot of people in our community where we just don't have the information. So yeah, that's my experience with voting.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your honesty, your transparency. We got to start from somewhere, and I feel like, for one, humbling ourselves to just be honest. So thank you.
Definitely.
Another person that I asked to be on the call is near and dear to me, Zae Sellers. She is a young woman who I have been blessed to know, I don't even know how many years. Oh my goodness, probably, well over 6, 7, if not more. She's a second daughter to me. But I'm gonna let you tell them who you are and some of your experience about voting and why you're on the call.
Okay. So as she said, my name is Zae. I am a college student right now. I am a community outreach specialist for Tri-Construction, and I'm also a crisis counselor at North Point. My experience with voting is a little different. My godmother ran for councilwoman, and she was councilwoman for a year, and then she ran again and didn't win. But in 3rd grade, I remember like Halloween dressing up and going to people's houses like, hey, are you guys gonna vote? And just really getting out there. And one thing that always stuck to me since then was just, it was so much fun. It was so much fun getting out there. And then after the elections and the voting process, when she didn't win, she was still getting calls like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And there were so many people who failed to get out and vote. There were so many people who actually failed to get out and vote. And it's just, sometimes we feel, especially as people of color, and we're always marginalized. Sometimes we feel that we're not important, and sometimes we feel like our decision doesn't even matter, our vote doesn't matter, but it really does, especially when it comes to councilwomen and city council, things like that. Yes, presidential elections matter, just like you guys were talking about. That's the only one that people really come out for. But as you see, in different states, there are different policies, especially when it comes to police brutality, police laws, regulations. And so that's really what I'm on here for, is just to talk about, especially city council, and things that, you know, influence us directly, and just getting more involved too.
Okay. I think y'all can see why I asked Zae to be on the call. I love her. But I something that we talked about before the call too, that I touched on, and I want to touch on it again while we're live. It's important to me that we are empowering our young adults. Their voices, their boldness is so powerful. And if used in the right way, can seriously kick off change. But we got to be on one accord, and we got to be passing it on, and we got to empower them to start using the voice that they have. So that's why I wanted Zae on the call. Thank you, Zae. We're going to hear from you some more later. So the other person that I asked to be on the call is Miss Aarica Coleman. And I am going to let Aarica tell you more about herself, but she is running for Senator of Minnesota District 34. And just to be transparent, I met Miss Aarica back when our kids were like 7th, 8th grade, running AAU track. Uh-oh, was it before that?
They were younger.
Ooh-wee! Get me together. How young were they?
Because by the time Malachi got to 8th grade, he wasn't running track. Like he was. So they had to have been 3rd, 4th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we met when our babies was out on the track running, and we were moms doing what moms do, sitting in the bleachers, getting our kids together, making sure they were supposed to be. But if we fast forward to now, where both of our kids are grown, her baby is starting college and my daughter is getting ready to graduate, to see Aarica now, as a Black woman, but not just a Black woman, as a mom, as a beautiful person that I have always seen as bold and strong, but to see her in this position, I am blessed to have you on the call. I'm blessed to hear more about you. And that's why I wanted to have this platform, is to allow your voice to be heard with us too. So thank you for making room in your schedule. Thank you for being present. We got some direct questions for you. I know you're going to introduce yourself, but if you can make sure to please let us know a little bit about who you are, what made you decide to run, and tell us more about District 34. What does that mean?
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm always going to have time for my village, always. Because
Okay.
the village, that helped me raise Malachi, and I still have another one coming up. My name's Aarica Coleman, and I'm running for Senate District 34, as you said. Senate District 34 encompasses the cities of Maple Grove, Dayton, Osseo, and Rogers in the northwest suburbs of Minnesota. And I wanted to go back real quick because I have a similar story about growing up as far as voting. I was pretty much taught it was just an expectation. And I wasn't really taught or involved with local elections. I actually did not understand who represented what. And to be really honest, I did not understand it until I got into further down into real estate. So I've been in real estate for over 20 years. I'm a licensed real estate broker. I'm a mother, community advocate, small business owner, and policy analyst with the city of Minneapolis. So wide array of things. But I got into more politics, or looking into voting and what meant what, when I worked for an affordable housing complex. And I worked for an affordable housing complex as a property manager after being homeless. So I actually was homeless for a short period of time due to the economic downturn and different things that happened there, as the Black community felt it before anybody else did. So when I was homeless, the resources weren't there because it wasn't a crisis at that moment. But I went to work at an affordable housing complex out here in Plymouth, actually, because I wanted to get my son into Wayzata Public Schools. It was considered a top public school system. And so I was like, I need to get him in the best education that I can afford. And that's a public school system education. And I moved out here. We moved into an apartment. I worked for the complex, got a break on rent. And then I was like, wait, who's calling the shots? And what does affordable really mean? And it actually came down to government subsidy. And so I was like, who's making these rules that say how some of us that are considered the poorest are able to live? And when I started to look into that, I just went full force into policy. I got into the Government Affairs Committee with the Realtors, which is a trade organization, the largest trade organization actually in the country. And I just started learning. And when I got into it, I started learning at the level of the state level. So I didn't even understand there was a whole city level that I needed to figure out, and a county and a regional. So when I got into it that way, I just really decided to find out where was the money coming from, who was calling the shots, who made the rules, and how does that impact our daily lives, and why was there such a disconnect? So from there, I went into Hennepin County tax forfeited land, which a lot of people don't hear about, but that's how a lot of Black folks lose their property across the country. If you don't pay your property taxes, you can own the house outright. If you don't pay your property taxes, the state can actually forfeit your property, which means they take it and they will sell it to somebody else to pay off your debt. Then I went to the city of Minneapolis to work in housing policy and development. So my whole life has become policy and working in it to understand the intersection of housing with education, with transportation, with public safety, which I believe wholeheartedly includes housing, education, healthcare, and then law enforcement. But public safety is more of like the social determinants that we have. And from there, I'll fast forward to George Floyd being murdered by my ex-coworkers, because I have to be honest, City of Minneapolis police officers were technically Minneapolis employees. So my ex-coworkers murdered a Black man, a person, and it was filmed. And I was no longer going to protest through marching. And I said, my lane has been policy all this time. I have taken my hardships and my stumbling blocks and turned them into building blocks. This is my lane. And so because this is my lane and I fully understand it, I can no longer ask anybody else to get in that lane and make decisions that I think or that I feel would be equitable for my family, but not only for my family, but for my community that I have heard from my community. I have to do it myself. And so I said, okay, now's the time. I was originally going to wait to run for office for another 2 years or so. And I said, nope, can't do it anymore. I'm going to jump in. And so that's how I got to this point today, where I'm at and running the race for Senate District 34 as senator.
Wow. You got a story, sis. But I love it. I like to see how it all flowed, how it's all coming together, and how you're stepping out in faith, and you're stepping out in what you know to be true. So thank you for sharing that with us. We did go ahead and field some questions. I've asked people from teenagers in high school to grown adults, and I wanted to do it where they didn't have to be on camera, because I wanted people to be honest about the level of questions that they have. And so I feel like we got a good mixture. These questions are open to anybody to answer. Aarica, you probably will be answering most, just so you know, if not all. But we're learning, and so we appreciate just being in this space and learning with you. So first one that I got is, why should I vote? Does our vote even matter?
Can I say something really quick?
Absolutely.
So those of us that are on the call, I would encourage you to not only get this information, but also give this information. So when you have it, and it's on, what, 9 of us in here, teach someone else what you pick up from this call, so we can all continue to teach in our community.
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons for live too, is because we can save that and share it. Everybody may not be able to be on this call. You may have a teenager, a young adult. They don't have to be 18 to start learning. Get them later on. Let's sit down and watch this call. We'll also upload it on our YouTube channel, just so you guys know. So there's going to be a lot of room to hear it later on too. But thank you for bringing that out.
So Darelle, you didn't want to answer the question?
Oh, see, I was going to answer it, but what had happened was I knew you had it, so I was just going to let you.
Don't get shy now.
Because I know Ms. Coleman. I know that she'll be answering some other ones, so I'll jump in on this one because I know you'll answer some other ones. But,
all right, let's go.
Is it important to vote? Yes. That is why we are on here. Yes. First off, voting overall, especially for people of color, has been such a challenge. Everybody might not know about, what our ancestors had to go through, but I can tell you, I know personally, my mom's uncle, he had work. And so on the day of when he had to vote, he told his boss, hey, I'm going in to vote. Can I come in like an hour later? And his boss said, no. And because you said that, I'm going to make sure that you're here on time or you're going to get fired. And my uncle still was able to go and vote. He was first thing in the morning, got up, went and vote, and still went to his job. And so when our ancestors, I feel like when our ancestors go through things to get, rights to vote, education, just being able to walk through the front door, I think that we can't take that for granted, and we can't just say, oh, like our ancestors went through a lot. And so voting is very important. Does your voice matter? Yes. That's why we're here. That's why people run for office. That's why people run for, that's why Ms. Coleman is doing what she's doing, because it matters and you have a voice. And yes, sometimes people off the street, if they just went to a police officer and said, police brutality sucks and blah, 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 they might get ignored. But that's why we all come together and vote, and we elect people who can actually make a change, because you can only ignore us for so long. And that's what voting really is. You can't ignore, just like the protests, you can't ignore numbers. So that's why it's really important to vote.
I concur.
I like Zae. Mm-hmm. Hey, that's good. Amen. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm like, okay.
All right.
All right. I think we're going to move on. I think that was powerful, unless somebody else wants to add on to it.
I just want to add on to that, exactly what Zae said. And it's important to vote because you also have the ability to hold people accountable. Voting strictly says that as you use your voice or your vote to put certain people in office, that they speak for you. They represent you. And so who represents you? You need to look at the people that are in all different offices of all different levels. That's school board, park board, county, state, local, city, national. Who represents you? Do you see yourself reflected in who is supposed to be your district representative? Because that's really what they are. So that is why you vote, and that is why it matters. And if they don't represent you, you need to vote them out.
Come on. Thank you. All right, next question. What is the difference in electoral votes versus popular votes?
So electoral votes is by the Electoral College, which is a system that was set up, but it's racist in its very inception. But that is a lot of things that in this country, the systems that are built on. Popular vote is the actual number. So how many people actually went out and voted and chose that candidate. So to put that in regular terms, President Donald Trump received the electoral vote, which means each state has so many electoral votes that they choose, that just chosen to go towards which candidate, but Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So that system that's set up, that is at the national level.
Can I ask why it was decided to have an electoral college vote and a popular vote? And does the popular vote sway the electoral vote, or does the electoral vote sway the popular vote?
So actually would have to look at to why the Electoral College was set up. I don't know that off the top of my head. I know the history, but I don't want to say nothing incorrect. No, the Electoral College vote does not sway the popular vote. And I mean, honestly, you could say neither one of them sway either one of them, because if that was the case, then Donald Trump wouldn't be president, because the popular vote that went to Hillary would have swayed the Electoral College vote.
Right. And so my understanding was that the electoral vote was more of like the representation of the popular vote, right? Am I saying that wrong? So it represents what the popular vote outcome is. So what I'm really trying to grasp is, how can the popular vote, right, be more for Hillary, and then the electoral vote goes to Donald Trump? Shouldn't it reflect?
So it would, but there's each state gets a certain number of Electoral College votes, and it doesn't match up per state. So it's not evenly distributed. And so you can have places that have a higher number of residents or of people, but yet they have less Electoral College votes that they can deem for a candidate than another state that has less people but has more Electoral College votes.
I.e. Texas.
Okay. So does that have anything to do with the census as well? Like, as far as how many people or how many electoral votes are counted per state?
I'm gonna Google it, because I know as far as the census is really big about the money that gets put into each money each state gets, and how that breaks down to counties, cities, and whatnot. But I'm going to look into if the correlation of the electoral vote and the census, and I will get back to you. I'll probably put it in the chat of the comments of this on Facebook.
And I wrote it down too, because I figured, we are shooting a lot of questions at you, and there may be some additional, and so I wanted to have a way for people to get their answers, so we can either email or we can put them in the chat so that people can see them. And I think putting them in the chat is the best way, because then anybody can see them. So I like that. Anything else on that one before I move on? Okay. All right. How do I know who I should vote for, Republican versus Democrat? What's the difference in the platforms?
That's a loaded question. Here in Minnesota, we have the Democratic Farmer and Labor Party, DFL, which is the Democratic Party, and we have the GOP, which is the Republican Party. And I filed as DFL, and I'm just going to be honest, I'm not big on party lines. And what that means is that there are certain issues or certain priorities that each party has broadly. So you'll hear liberal, which would refer to the Democratic Party, and you'll hear conservative, which would refer to the Republican Party. Conservative runs along the lines of being evangelical Christians, opposing same-sex marriage, pro-life, which means opposing abortion. Liberal Democratic Party would be more pro same-sex marriage, pro-choice, and Medicare for all, right? So like what it would be considered basic human rights or basic human needs that we would have that would want to support. It's a lot more grayer than that, a lot more murkier. So I will not push anyone to vote per party lines. You vote your values. You vote your values and where you are in your life at this point in time. And I say that because as we grow and as we experience life's ups and downs, we could change our viewpoints. And that's just that simple. So what you want to look at is you want to look at candidates. You want to look at the seats that they are running for. You want to look at what they represent, what they say, and reach out to them. If they're really supposed to represent you, you need to look at the candidate and what their platform is. There's regular talking points that you will see on both sides, but you need to dig a little bit deeper. Like I said, this person would represent you and make choices on your behalf. So you have to look at the people and the candidates that are running and the seats that they're running for, and what does that mean, as well as how they can work with other people. Nothing is done in a silo. And although I'm running for one seat, I have to be able to work with other senators, other representatives, and other elected officials at all different levels of government, as well as community. So all of that matters, and you really need to do your homework to look at into people. And if you go to the Secretary of State website, mnvotes.org, you literally can type in your address and see who's on your ballot. And that would show you the different seats that are up for election. And most people have a web page where you can click on it and go to their web page. If they don't, if you Google their name, something's going to come up in this day and age to learn more about them.
Awesome. Thank you, Darelle, for putting that down there. Are you talking to us? I think he's muted. Okay.
No, I was just saying, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure we had that link so we know exactly where to go and see what's on the ballot.
You on it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. I think, let's see. I want to see if this is along the lines of what we're talking about before I run off. I have a quick question from Brian, and his question is, Ms. Coleman, can you speak to the power of money in elections and how Black people need to vote and support candidates with money?
So this is one that, as just a regular person, because I consider myself a regular person like everybody else, this is one that kind of frustrates me. Elections initially or originally are ran by money. So a lot of times you'll hear, first of all, raising money for an election is public information. So as a candidate, there is a campaign finance board with the state of Minnesota that has a ton of rules. And each office that you can run for that you have to file with the campaign finance board at the state level keeps detailed records on what money you raise and what you spend money on. What you'll hear in a lot of elections, you'll like hear right now in Congressional District 5, the current representative and one of her opponents, they're like, he's raised millions of dollars, like millions, literally. Part of me is like, wow, we could really fix some things with that. But anyways, he's raised a lot of money, and it's making news because money usually buys elections at that level. It buys the candidacy. And basically when you are raising that type of money, you are saying you will do certain things or support certain things that the people with big money were able to pay for, basically by you. Not everybody does that, but that's widely the way it has been or is. As far as with Black people and the need to vote and support candidates with money, is that campaigns are not cheap. They're not. Like, every single thing costs. And I'm gonna give you a case in point. I've mentioned the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. There is a whole piece of endorsing, which means they basically give their okay for you to run this race as a party, and you become the DFL endorsed candidate. However, at the state level, when they hold the endorsing convention for the parties and when's the last day you can actually file to run for office, do not match up. So the party runs a whole endorsing convention to pick a candidate that they want to represent their party, before the deadline for anyone to enter the race has passed. So when that happens, when you're the endorsed candidate, you have access to money from the parties, because there's a 2 major party system in our country. Even though we have more parties than that, there's a 2 major party system. You have access to the money from the party, and there's access to what's called a voter access network. So it's the VAN. And if you are not a DFL endorsed candidate, you don't get access to that network unless you know somebody that you can, cite the rules that say they can sell you access to that network. And what that network is whenever you have registered to vote and have voted and put your information down and said you vote with this party, your information goes into a database. So when you're wondering why am I getting these flyers with my name on them, or how did you get my phone number? That's how they got it. Now that information is also public information to anyone in the state. So you could literally go to the Secretary of State webpage, pay $30 and get that information. But the way the parties hold on to it is to kind of keep things in a status quo. And so that's not okay. And so when you have candidates, especially Black candidates that are running, we're already on the outskirts, just as Black candidates. And I have to be honest about that. Even if we go through the proper procedure or process and get the approval, we're still on the outskirts, at least in Minnesota. I can't speak for other states, but at least for Minnesota. And we need money to do mailers, to get yard signs, to get the access to voters' information, to let people know we're running and to tell them about ourselves. And so you will see candidates fundraise. It's not a GoFundMe, but it's similar to that, because there's systems that are in place that raise the money, or excuse me, that you can donate the money through, and it tracks the information, because that's the other thing. When you donate to a campaign, that is also public information. So what is needed when you donate to a campaign is your name, your address, your employer. When you donate, your employer's needed when you go over a certain amount, but most campaigns just collect it. But it's extremely important because a lot of us are starting at -5 or below because we don't have the money to put into a campaign to run a campaign. And it's really a marketing campaign. So.
That was so informative. Thank you. that was for me.
Too much.
No, it was helpful. I just learned a lot, and not to sit on this question too long, but a lot of times people want to know, what do you want money for? And the way that you broke it down, and also just the importance of having the endorsements and things like that, we need to know that. Otherwise it just looks like, give me money, give me money. So I appreciate that and breaking that down, because honestly, I didn't know, and I know I'm not the only one. So I appreciate you breaking it down the way you did and spending the time on that question. It wasn't too much. Thank you. All right. The next question is a little lengthy. If you don't want to vote for either candidate, for example, with this election or last election, should you vote for a third party to honor our ancestors' sacrifice for us to be able to vote?
I'm gonna say, yeah, write in whoever you want to write in. I mean, there's a write-in option. Now, it does, when you do that, so another real life example where when Hillary won the popular vote, but President Trump got the electoral college vote, there were supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders who either did not vote or they wrote his name in. Well, that vote is a non-vote. But I don't want to take away somebody's choice and tell you to just pick someone because that's what you need to do. I think rights. We have the right to say, my voice is being heard. I'm writing this name in because that's what I believe. None of y'all running, I feel, will represent me. I would encourage you from there to hold whoever is elected accountable, whether they're the person you wanted or not. Hold them accountable, speak up, speak out, organize right where you are. I love when the youth do it.
Yes.
Listen, I love when the youth organize. I'm like, yep, I'll show up to support, but I'm gonna stay in the background because I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So organize right where you are. Even if you're not at the age to vote, pay attention. Pay attention when you have time in middle school and high school to see how this really plays out in your everyday life. And that's why local elections are so important, because it really dictates your everyday life. If you're wondering why you couldn't get Mountain Dew at school anymore, because that was like a whole thing that got voted on through like school boards, it's because of who was elected to the school board, which is another election. So like it literally comes down to the very simple details of your everyday life, like sidewalks outside of your home, noise ordinance rules that say after 10 p.m. you can't play music too loud because you're disturbing. Like all of those things were actually voted on. So I want to also tie that back to voting's not just for a candidate. Voting is for issues. So there's different issues that you vote on, especially at the city level and the school board. Like right now, there we go. Right now, you keep hearing about change the charter, or the charter amendment allow us to vote in the city of Minneapolis about the steps that they want to take around defunding or abolishing the police. And don't get me to talking about it because I'm not quite sure. Because I cannot vote in Minneapolis, I was like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting upset about what's happening because I can't vote. I can't. So I want to leave that to the residents of Minneapolis to decide what they want it to look like. But that's another issue that's on a ballot, and they're fighting for the Charter Commission to allow the question, that's all they're asking for, is the question to be on the ballot in November. So yes, your vote matters, not just for candidates or people, but issues are placed on the ballots. And you have to be able to vote for that in your local elections.
That's good. And that's actually another question that we got was, what does it mean, don't vote for a candidate, instead vote policy? And I feel like you've touched on that a couple times, but is there anything else you really want to draw out with that question?
That I don't think we all understand that what policy is. At the city of Minneapolis, a program that has to go before city council becomes a policy, and a policy is a rule or law. So when I am bringing forth programs or program guidelines that get adopted by the city of Minneapolis, I cannot have another program or actions that go against that approved program unless I bring it back to the city council, who was duly elected by the residents of the city of Minneapolis to represent the residents, to approve it or to change it and say, we don't like the way that program is structured. We want to see this because our constituents say this. So that is when it comes down to voting policy. I would say, yes, vote policy, but pay attention, because I personally get very frustrated when I hear people on the campaign trail saying, I will. You will try, but please do not promise me that you're going to do something when it takes more than just you to vote that in or to pass that. So you will support, you will encourage, you will champion, you will co-author, you will try, but don't tell me what you're going to pass, because that's not accurate in my opinion. So
I hope everybody's listening to what she just said.
Oh yeah,
Can I also
I'm getting
piggyback
all
on
this.
that?
I'm getting all this.
Right. Can I piggyback on that too?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna just put this in some terms that some younger people understand if they don't understand the language that you're using. So we shouldn't just vote because of how people look or because somebody's male or female. We also shouldn't vote just because somebody is Black. Okay, Black power, yes, but you don't just vote for somebody because they're Black. You don't vote for somebody because they're a celebrity, aka Donald Trump. You don't vote for people just because of how they look. You're supposed to vote for people for what they stand for. Also, I believe that the apple does not fall from the tree. So I'm going to need for us to look at, daughters, sons, nieces, and nephews, because you can fake it, but your kids can't. So you can't, it doesn't matter how much money, it doesn't matter how put together you look, Miss Coleman. If your son is out here looking a hot mess, I'm gonna be like, you just faking it. And so that's another thing that we have to look at. We spend a lot of time on Facebook and Instagram. And so if that's what we're going to do, I need you to look and see, where were people when people were out here protesting, what were others doing? And if they weren't out here protesting, that's fine. But what are they doing now? And if they're still going about their daily life and not using their platform, and they have 5,000, 15,000, whatever followers on Instagram, and they have not said a word, that's an issue. So what Miss Coleman is saying is, you don't just vote for people because how they look, but you need to vote for people for what they stand for, what they promote, what they post, who are they hanging out with, and all those things. Just want to add that for people who don't understand the language that you're using.
Don't mute yet, Zae, because I got a question for you since you don't unmute it. Let's hear from you a little more. This next question is along the same lines, and I think you can speak to it. How can we not get caught up in the social media and hype so that we can see what is really going on in the elections and who we're voting for?
I think it's the same with people now. You can look at people's, posts and see them, whatever they're like. You go on some people's posts right now and you see them in front of burning buildings. Now, let's be honest, they didn't burn those buildings. They're just taking pictures in front of it. And so, come on. Because no, but a lot of things, hear people talk. It is very difficult to, even though some candidates do now, it is very difficult, at least to me, to continually lie, but over, like what we're doing right now, interview. It would be really hard for you to catch me off guard for me to just lie. Or if I'm going to lie, I'm going to say, let me get back to you, or I'll have this person answer for me. Right? And so I think that's important. Also, reaching out yourself, seeing them in person is something major. Don't just see somebody on social media, because you never know. I could have a screen right here and just be reading from it. You never know. And so also what you were saying, reach out to them because they're going to represent you. And like I said, the people around them, I think the people around you they're going to tell on you before you do.
Come on.
I think, yeah, you really have to look at the people who you surround yourself with, because they are going to tell on you before you do. They'll accidentally tell your business before you, and you'll be looking at them like, so you got to look at them. You got to look at them like, okay. So the people who they surround themselves with, what are they doing in their time? What you do with your time is major. If you just sit around, like right now, you guys are spending time on this, but if you're just sitting around watching YouTube videos on nothing, what kind of change are you trying to make, right? So how do people spend their time? What do you see them doing? At least on Instagram, if they're faking it well, because they're actually spending time doing it, So, but that's what I would say.
Thank you. I love it.
Some very, very good points. And I just want to add some scripture to that point. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed due to a lack of knowledge. Because you rejected that knowledge, I will also reject you." In order for us to truly understand and truly live, not just be here, but actually live the way we were intended to live, we need to seek out knowledge like this. We need to seek out who's out there, who are we going to support, who are we going to hold accountable. And so knowledge is so important for all of us to truly grasp, because it's the thing that's going to help us sustain and the thing that's going to help us live. So just wanted to add that to that point, Zae. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. And just flowing off of that too, we do lack because we lack understanding. We suffer because we lack understanding. So that's why we are doing these platforms. So, man, this is good. I'm learning today, and I'm humbling myself to say I'm learning. Thank you. Darelle, did you have a question for us? This next one?
I had a question, but I think you asked the question. So
okay.
Let's
Okay.
just keep going.
All right. So next question I have, and this is a good one because we talked about this in the beginning. What is the difference in the primary and general elections?
Yes. So I'm gonna have to say I learned more about this in the last, I don't know, 5-7 years or so. The primary election, if you have more than one candidate of the same party in a race, so I am running for Senate District 34, and I filed as Democratic Farmer and Labor, so DFL. There's already a DFL endorsed candidate in the race. That DFL endorsed candidate and I are basically facing off in the primary. The primary election in Minnesota this year is on August 11th, and that determines who's on the general election ballot in November to go up against the Republican incumbent. So at this point, there are two of us in the race that have filed with the same party. And that race, that vote is happening right now. So with COVID and everything, it's been really a lot. It's been a whirlwind. And we are in the time of a presidential election. So usually in the year of a presidential election, you have a better opportunity in the primary because people have to go to vote for the primary, for the presidential primary, which we don't have a presidential primary, Democratic presidential primary this year because Joe Biden is already the presumed candidate and we don't have to vote on it. So I normally would have been on the ballot and I would have been on the ballot with Joe Biden. I think I would have framed that one just, but I'm on the ballot though. Let me get, I'm on the ballot right now. Like my name is there. But with COVID, like I said, you can go to mnvotes.org and you could actually request your ballot to be mailed to you. And so primary elections, August 11th. Oh, see, my cousin came prepared.
I know, right?
So you can request your ballot be mailed to you. It'll get mailed to you. You can vote in all of the elections that are currently happening, and then you mail it back in. That is how you vote in the primary election to have your voice heard of which candidate you want to see in the general election in November. The general election determines who actually gets the seat. So I have two, well, I'm gonna say I have two elections because I'm gonna win the primary. But that is the reason and the difference. And that's why I keep saying who represents you and you decide. Because you decide your voice matters right now on who is going to be on the general election to go against the candidate for Senate District 34 or any other district at this point. And like I said, early voting is happening now, so you can request your ballot. And that's between June 26th and August 10th is when you can vote by mail. August 11th, you go in person. So to vote in the primary election, if you have not requested your ballot be mailed to you so that you can mail it back in by August 10th, like postmarked August 10th, you have to go vote in person, mask up. Governor just put that mandate out today. And you can still go to mnvotes.org and find your polling place. So the polling place would tell you based on your address, what is the location that you can go and vote. And polling places are open, I believe, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's the standard time. If you don't feel comfortable voting by mail, you have the option to vote in person. If you don't feel comfortable voting in person, I'm gonna need you to go to mnvotes.org and get your ballot request in now, because otherwise you will need to vote in person. And again, your vote matters, your voice matters, and we will no longer go unheard and ignored.
Come on. Come on. Thank you. Whew, okay. Next question. Why is it important to vote for state office and city council?
So there's multiple state offices. State offices are governor of the executive branch, Senate and House of Representatives of the legislative branch, and judges. I don't know if everybody know, we vote for judges. So when we get real upset about the criminal justice system not being just for us, who is in every seat, right? So you said city council. So the state offices, legislative, executive, judicial, make a difference about, so I'll take for the Senate. What a senator does is a senator can bring forth or draft policy. A senator can modify policy, which becomes law. A senator is approving the appointments of the state departments, appointments of the State Department commissioners. So there is Department of Corrections, there's Department of Commerce, Department of Education, Minnesota Housing. There's multiple departments that have commissioners, and the governor can decide who he wants to appoint, but the Senate has to confirm those appointments. So it was a big deal when Kamala Harris didn't want, I forget his name, but she didn't want him to become a Supreme Court justice. And so she was like, no, my vote says no, I'm not confirming him for this appointment. That happens, everything that happens at the US level, the national level, federal, happens at the state level. So that's one thing the senator does. And the senator or senators are over the budget for the state. So they have the final say on the budget for the state, which is billions of dollars.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, I don't mean to cut you off, and making sure that I'm understanding, it's, in my opinion, even more important to learn, seek out more information, and understand who you're voting for at these state and local levels than, to me, in my opinion, than we talk about president. I mean, obviously president matters, don't misquote me. But when we're talking about these things that are directly affecting our daily lives with housing and all, in our budgets and school systems, that starts at state and local. Am I understanding correctly?
Oh, that's correct.
Okay.
Local is considered municipal or city.
Okay.
So each city has a certain number of city council members and mayor, and there's money that comes into the city from the state. So there's things that happen in your city that they get money from the state, and that is allocated through the budget at the state level, which the Senate has the final say on. Also, education. There's a state education department that is over public education, but they also they weigh in on charter school education as well. That breaks down to your level as a city or a school district. There is Minnesota Housing, which is a state agency. It used to be called Minnesota Housing and Finance Agency. That breaks down to your level. So case in point, how there's we're in a housing crisis, and we have a homeless epidemic, right? People are looking at Minnesota Housing. So what are you doing all the money that you get? Minnesota Housing just rolled out a whole opportunity for $100 million that is for rent, for housing assistance. So whether it's home ownership or rental housing, they need administrators at the local levels to say, yes, we will be the intermediate to work with community members so they can apply to get the funding to pay their rent or mortgage so they don't end up homeless. That came from the $100 million that the Senate approved through the budget for the state housing agency to have to come down to the local level. So you see how that just went all down to you, and then the steps that we had to go through. There's one extra piece that gets real confusing, but we have a regional governing body here in Minnesota, and it's kind of unique the way it's set up to Minnesota, but Metropolitan Council. So we're all familiar with Metro Transit. Well, Met Council owns Metro Transit, and Met Council, the Metropolitan Council, has 13 council members and a chair. They are all appointed by the governor. And they have a budget. So not only does Met Council own Metro Transit, Met Council owns Metro HRA, which is Metropolitan Housing and Redevelopment Authority, which is a large redevelopment authority that Section 8 comes through. So vouchers for Section 8, St. Paul, Maple Grove, different cities have the go through Metro HRA. Met Council is over the regional park system, and Met Council is over our infrastructure. So water, sewer, and transportation within the 7-county metro. So it's not even all of the counties, but the major cities that we're sitting in: Hennepin County, Scott, Dakota, Washington, Ramsey, Carver. That's a part of the Met Council, and that's another place where the Senate can approve or readjust what their funding looks like and what they can do with it. So yes, it's extremely important, and there's a lot of different levels, but I want to say that we all work together though. So you can see the state level. The state is working with the city council members, school board members. Those conversations happen on a regular basis. So, their network. We talk about in the Black community about social capital, and social capital is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But in the Black community, it's what you know and who you know.
Who you know.
So we have to be that much better. But that makes a difference in working with or in politics and what that looks like to the community. So does the intent match the impact? So what is the actual intent of those that represent us? Because just like I'm running, there are other people that represent me and that are running for office that I'm looking at them just like they're looking at me, because do you represent my values? And so with that, we all have to work together and call on our social capital and work with community to move forward transformation. I won't even say change at this point. Move forward transformation so that we the people really represents we the people, and that we all do better when we all do better, as Paul say.
Wow, that's very powerful. I just wanted to just kind of piggyback a little bit and just say that you're painting a picture for all of us to kind of see where systematic oppression can happen if we don't have the correct people representing us in these seats, or one or two representatives having given a voice to our actual needs and giving a voice to all of this. So it's very important for us to get involved in voting on these levels, not just the presidential level. So thank you for explaining that and breaking that down to me. It really shows me where the connections are and where the disconnections can be. Thank you.
Absolutely. I agree. We have a couple more questions left. I know we're getting near the end, but if you guys have the time, I'd love, because there's just a couple left, and I want to make sure that we get people's questions answered. Are you guys good? Okay. Aarica, what excludes you from being able to vote? Is there anything that would cause you to not be able to vote?
Yes. If you're not keen, by election day, you need to register to vote. You can also register on the day of election at your polling place. And sadly, if you are on paper as I hate the terms, but as a convicted felon, or as, I really hate the terms, or on paper, such as on probation or on parole. So if your rights have been taken from you. And I struggle with that one because I wrapping my mind around it, it's very frustrating that if we have a criminal justice system that says if you do a crime, then you do time, or you're fined or whatever. But the punishment goes beyond that to say you're not a full citizen, you're not a full resident, you're not allowed to use your voice. So just the idea that you are literally shutting people up. And then understanding that people are targeted and have just all kinds of bogus things that happen to people that keep you oppressed or down or not being able to use your voice. Being a college student does not restrict you from being able to vote. This was a question that I started asking people. I was like, so wait, my son's going to college. If he goes out of state, how does he vote? I was instructed, when you're in college, you're still home, you're still dependent of your parents. Vote under that address. Vote under your parents' address, do an absentee ballot, and vote. You can vote in college, at college campuses, but depending on where you go to school, there are other things at play to restrict your vote. So I would be very careful. Every state, city, college is not created equal. And so there are things that are there just to restrict you being able to vote and use your right to vote. So basically, you're really held back from voting if you are not considered a citizen of this country. I hate that too. You can be a permanent resident, which means that you have approval to be here, to live in this country, to work. But if you're not a citizen, you're not allowed to vote. And if you have a criminal record where you are still required to check in with a probation officer, or you're still under, still completing your sentence, you're not allowed to vote. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep right there. I didn't realize that if you're still on paper, you can't vote.
No.
Wow.
And that's something that you have people that have made mistakes in their past and have learned from those mistakes to move on, but didn't realize that they can vote now because they're no longer on paper, because they've been disenfranchised for so long. So you have people that may have the right to vote, but don't know it, because if you vote and you're not supposed to, you now have committed a crime.
Wow.
So that, yeah.
I don't have words for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And that's a little sobering right there. Yeah. Okay. We do have one last question that was fielded. Can we talk about voter suppression? What to do if that happens, or you feel that has happened?
So there's a few things. One, we have Black Votes Matter. We have the ACLU, we have the NAACP, and that's just this community right here. We have different advocacy groups on the ground working with people and educating on your rights, basically. And voter suppression is so real. Voter suppression shows up in locking the doors on you, changing the polling places, closing them down, telling you have the wrong ID. Like, there's just so many things the way voter suppression shows up. I would encourage, you know what? I would encourage you to vote with people. Vote in a group. Show up to the polling places, vote in a group, look at your rights through the Secretary of State, minnesotavotes.org. Look at Black Votes Matter. Your rights are listed. It's all listed out of what you need to have. If you don't have your ID, the forms of identification you can bring, like a piece of mail, like all these things are listed, but it's not readily available. You have to go looking for it. And so, again, those organizations, ACLU, NAACP, Black Votes Matter, you will see more of the ACLU in particular organizing across the Twin Cities to make sure people know that they can vote and where to vote and what's needed for them to vote. So that's where, and I'm sorry, ACLU is American Civil Liberties Union. That's what it is. ACLU. They work really well on organizing that space to make sure people know their rights, getting to the polls. But really, I say voting groups, vote with others, because that way it's really a divide and conquer mindset, right? If you have multiple people that are with you, that you're on you have the same goal, same mindset, it's not as easy for people to just push you to the side and say, well, we're just going to tell you anything we want to tell you. And I'm not saying that's actually happening, but it is. So I would say do that. Voter suppression happens at all different levels. One of the things you'll hear about is gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is how they draw the lines of districts to exclude people from voting, or to make it more difficult for you to get to the polls, especially when you have communities that are higher populations of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, or when you have communities that are higher populations of elderly or low wealth. The lines get drawn and you'll see that the polling place is far out, and you're like, well, how are they supposed to get to that polling place? Things like that help with voter suppression, basically to shut you up. So we come back to, yes, your vote matters. Yes, you should vote. Yes. And if it didn't matter, all of these things would not be in place to shut you up.
Woo. Say it one more time. One more time in case they didn't hear you, sis. Say it one more time, please.
Yes, your vote matters. Yes, you should vote. And if it did not matter, they would not have all these things in place to shut you up. And when I say they, I mean the systems that are at play that are built upon white supremacy and racism, elitism, sexism, to keep people out, socialism, to keep people out. That's literally what these systems are built upon. And what's happening right now, which is why I love to see the youth organize, is people are saying, oh, I recognize that, and I'm not standing for it. So that is, again, this country was built at a certain point on protest. And I have to say that because it wasn't wholeheartedly built on protest. But it was built at a certain point on protest, which is our right. And you protest by going to the polls, voting, but only doing so after you have checked out who is running and what the issues are. And I have to say, I'm with Zae. Don't vote for people because they Black, woman, how they identify, I don't care. That includes myself. I have a webpage. I have information listed where my priorities are, and I'm willing to talk to you. Vote for me because I represent your values. So, yes.
How do we support you? How can people support you? Let us know.
Yes.
How can we help right now?
Yep. So right now, my webpage is voteaaricacoleman.com. You can donate through my webpage. But what I really need are volunteers. I have yard signs. I have literature, campaign literature that gives a snapshot about me that we are putting on people's doors. We're not door knocking. It's called a lit drop. So if you hear that, that's what that is. It's a lit drop that we're putting on people's doors, masked up. And we're making phone calls. So you could do that right where you are. I have a phone script. I have a list of numbers to call people in this district and say, hey, do you know that Aarica Coleman is running and this is what she stands for? And do you know you should vote August 11th in the primary? So I really need volunteers. I always need volunteers.
So do they sign up for all that by going to Vote Aarica? Does that list all the opportunities that we can help?
VoteAaricaColeman.com does list the opportunities to volunteer with the campaign, and it sends an email. And I'm probably going to be doing a volunteer day on Saturday where we can do all those different things. With the yard signs, it's really delivering yard signs, but phone calls are right where you are. And lit drops are within this district, so Maple Grove, Dayton, Osseo, and Rogers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have enjoyed myself tremendously. I've learned a lot. I know there's still a whole lot more to learn, but this is motivating and empowering for me. So thank you for allowing yourself to speak candidly. Zae, come on. I see that hand raised. Talk to us. Any last words?
Before we get off, we were kind of talking about this earlier when it came to the money, but I also want to push to people who are watching or who are going to watch again about our own economic, our geographical area, right? If we don't have a lot to offer, right? If we don't have a lot of money to offer, we don't have a lot of businesses, and we don't have just a lot to offer in general, then it's going to be very tough for us to leverage what we have to get what we want. And so we were talking about the money, how we need to, I think Brian was his name. He was saying, how do we, we should vote for the person who has the most money. And yes, sometimes, because that's, how things work, but also we have to work on our own community so that it's something that somebody would want to run. If I come, I'm gonna be 100%, I've lived in North Minneapolis all my life. If I come to North Minneapolis and I see garbage and everything, just a hot mess, it's gonna be like, okay, like I'll run and I'll win, but it's like, you can't really tell me, even though you're supposed to stick to your policy, you can't really tell me what to give you. You're not offering me anything. And that's something that we have struggled with. We don't have a lot to offer. So we need to make sure that we vote for the state and the city council and use those resources where we actually get jobs and build businesses over here. So it's actually worth something. If North Minneapolis is only worth a couple of dollars, but I go to Brooklyn Center or Brooklyn Park, Maple Grove, and they have a lot more, of course I'm going to want to pour into them because they can offer me something. They can leverage what they're offering. But if I don't have a lot to leverage, then it's going to be really tough. So another thing we have to focus on is our own community. Don't litter. Don't gang bang. Don't be out here shooting and killing, because that's going to be hard to run. If we focus on our own community and building it, then we can leverage what we actually have for those leaders to come in and actually do what they said they're going to do. So that's what I want to put out there too.
And we have heard from Zae. Darelle, I want to invite you. Thank you again for being on the call. I would like to invite you if you have any last words you want to say, share with us, thoughts, anything.
I really don't have a lot of expertise in this area. So I just want to say thank you for allowing us to have this platform. Aarica, thank you for answering our questions and giving us some insight about how things actually do run, how we can empower ourselves with our voices, with our votes. And also, I just want to challenge any gentlemen that are out there, any men that are out there. We are called to lead from the front. I just want to first of all, tip my hat off to the women on this call. You guys are powerful. You're amazing. But our men also do need to step up in our communities. We need to lead. We need to be the best examples that we can be. I grew up without a father in my home, without an example to kind of show me how to father. And so all of us have the responsibilities of being that surrogate to the young men in our community. So take your voice, take your responsibility, and do something that matters. So voting could be something that matters, and showing the next generation, hey, this is, so people before us have died for this right. They've literally laid down their lives and died for this right. Who are we to just squander what they've paid for? The toll was so much for them, what they paid, and for us to just squander it and just let it go is disrespectful and ridiculous. So I would just encourage each and every one of us to, as a people, to look at that and look at the sacrifice that was made and honor that in every way that we can, so we can look back and also look forward and say, look, this is exactly what they died for. This is exactly what they shed their blood for. The least we can do is do some research, find out who's out there, find out how to better our communities and better ourselves, and vote. That's it.
Amen. I wanted to just add a couple things at the end, and just one, obviously thank all of you again. It's overwhelming for me. One of the things that I am learning, and I want to pass and express on, don't let this be a thing that we just start looking into at this moment. Let this be something that we are continuing to have these conversations, but also using our eyes and our ears, paying attention throughout the year of things that are happening and who's in those positions and what needs to change in the future. Not waiting until it's time to vote to start looking for who's next, but what took place before, because that's we're supposed to learn from what's already happening. And if I can say anything, 2020 is teaching me a lot. And I will say this with COVID, yes, COVID has changed a lot, but it is challenging us to get more creative about how we do things. It's not shutting things down. It's forcing us to step up and get more outside of the box and allow ourselves to get more creative about how we're conversating, how we're learning, how we are still staying connected. So I am challenging everybody else too. This is not the buy all, end all. There's so much more that we need to be doing and saying, but we've got to allow ourselves to expand past what everybody else is telling us we're limited to. Use the vision that God has given us and allow ourselves to explore some of that. This is new for me, but we got to do something. It's going to take all of us. It's not a one person, it's all of us creating change, transforming. I love that, Aarica. Not creating change. We need to transform, because change ain't going to work anymore. This all needs to change. It needs to be transformed. So that was powerful. Thank you for saying that. Zae, I see your hand. Come on, Queen. And then we're going to close it out.
I was just agreeing. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
was that the little church ways? Okay. All right. Well, I want to let people, get on with their evening with their families. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you for everybody that had questions. Oh, I'm sorry. We got one more person that wants to jump on and say something really quick, please.